Ethan crouched behind a jagged piece of metal, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. Smoke hung thick in the air, burning his lungs with each breath, and the ground trembled under the weight of distant explosions. The battlefield was chaos, machines of war sparking, alien bodies scattered across the rocky terrain, and human soldiers running from cover to cover. He could feel his heart pounding, his senses screaming danger from every direction. A sudden shriek cut through the din, sharp and fragile. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound, scanning the debris-strewn field. There, huddled beneath the wreckage of a small hovercraft, was a child. The alien child was no older than 6, with silver eyes that reflected the fires around her, and small, delicate limbs trembling in fear. She had the soft, almost fragile look of a being born to a peaceful life, completely out of place on this war-torn planet. Ethan's first instinct was to stay down, to avoid drawing attention. But before his mind could weigh options, the enemy fire came. Bright streaks of energy cut through the smoke, searing holes in the ground where he had just been. The child screamed again, the sound twisting painfully through the air. Without thinking, Ethan bolted from cover, diving toward her. He threw himself over the child just as a pulse of energy hit the spot she had been crouching in. Pain exploded in his shoulder, and he gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stay down. His mind was a mixture of adrenaline and instinct. He had trained for countless combat scenarios, but nothing had prepared him for the look in those silver eyes, pure terror and trust all at once. "You're safe," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the explosions. "I've got you." He lifted her carefully, pressing her to his chest. The child flinched at the touch but didn't pull away. Ethan could feel her small heartbeat against his own, rapid and panicked. His body screamed for him to run, to find safer ground, but the world around them was a maze of fire, debris, and enemy patrols. Every step forward was a test of courage and calculation. He moved with precision, keeping low, using every shadow, every fallen piece of metal for cover. His mind raced. Where could he go? The battlefield stretched in every direction, and reinforcements for both sides were unpredictable. The child clutched at his uniform, and Ethan realized she couldn't speak his language, or perhaps she didn't know any human language at all. Still, her trust was enough. A sudden explosion to his left threw him to the ground, debris cutting his arms and legs. He groaned, tasting blood, but pushed himself up again. The child whimpered, her hands gripping his jacket. "It's okay," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he even believed it. Hours seemed to pass as they navigated the shattered landscape. He avoided open fields, skirting around enemy lines, slipping through rubble, and climbing over scorched terrain. He could hear the distant sounds of alien engines and human artillery, the cries of soldiers and civilians blending into a nightmarish symphony. Yet amid all the chaos, he noticed something remarkable. The child watched him intently, absorbing every movement, every decision he made. Her eyes were wide but not confused. It was as if she understood that her survival depended on him, and perhaps, somehow, that he would not fail her. By nightfall, Ethan found a small cave at the base of a scorched cliff. He dragged the child inside and collapsed against the wall, exhaustion washing over him like a wave. She pressed against him, still shivering, and he pulled a small blanket from his pack to cover them both. "Try to sleep," he murmured, though sleep was a distant thought for him. Every muscle ached, and the wound in his shoulder burned. But more than that, he couldn't stop thinking about what would happen if the enemy discovered them here. The child finally relaxed slightly, curling into him, and for a moment the battlefield seemed to fade away. Ethan studied her features, noting the unusual markings along her skin and the way her silver eyes reflected the faint starlight seeping into the cave. She wasn't like the soldiers he was used to facing, nor like any human child he had ever known. She was different, unique. And now her life depended entirely on him. Hours passed in tense silence. Occasionally, Distant explosions rattled the cave, reminding Ethan that safety was temporary. He spoke to her quietly, trying to soothe her with words she didn't understand but tones she seemed to recognize. "You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you." Her small hands found his, gripping tightly, as if she were anchoring herself to him in the storm of uncertainty. Ethan tended to his shoulder as best he could, using makeshift bandages from his pack. He didn't want to show weakness in front of her. She needed to see strength, courage, and assurance, even if he was struggling inside. Outside the cave, the world continued its relentless chaos. Reports of the child's survival had already reached the ears of someone powerful, her mother. Commander Saria was a figure both feared and revered among her people. She had trained her life to lead, to command, and to protect those she cared about. When she learned that her daughter had survived due to the actions of a human, her mind raced. Anger, curiosity, and a fierce maternal instinct combined into a single purpose: find the human who dared intervene. Meanwhile, Ethan's first day of refuge turned into night. The child slept fitfully, murmuring in her alien tongue, and he kept a vigilant watch. He thought about the events that had led him here, about the choices that had seemed instinctive yet now bore immense consequences. Protecting a child should have been simple, straightforward. But in a universe filled with unpredictable dangers, even a simple act of courage could ignite events far beyond one soldier's understanding. The next morning, Ethan planned their route. He needed to move before enemy patrols scouted the area. As he packed their meager supplies, the child awoke, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken question. He smiled faintly, offering a hand to help her stand. She took it without hesitation, and for the first time, Ethan felt a real connection forming, a bond forged not through language but through trust, bravery, and the shared experience of surviving the impossible. They traveled through burned forests and abandoned alien settlements. Ethan used his knowledge of tactics to avoid patrols, setting small traps and diversions to cover their path. The child, Lyra, was astonishingly alert. She pointed out dangers before Ethan could even notice them: collapsed beams, alien sentries, hidden tripwires. Every time she acted, he realized she was more than a child. She had awareness, intelligence, and intuition beyond her years. One afternoon, while resting near a river, Ethan noticed movement in the trees. He froze, signaling the child to stay low. Two alien scouts appeared, scanning the area. Ethan's instincts took over. Using the terrain, he created a small distraction, throwing debris into the opposite direction, and slipped past them with Lyra. His heart raced, adrenaline flooding through his veins. Each step forward was a test, and each test reminded him that the universe did not favor the timid. As night fell again, they found another safe spot, a hollowed-out structure of some long-abandoned alien facility. Here, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The child slept soundly, trusting him completely. He realized that protecting her was no longer a duty but a choice he would make again and again, no matter the risk. Far above them in the sky, alien ships scouted the area. Commander Saria's attention was unrelenting. She did not send a massive army yet. Instead, she watched, studying the human, trying to understand him. Every report she received painted a picture of bravery and ingenuity. A human soldier, injured and alone, navigating hostile terrain, keeping her child safe. Her curiosity and respect began to grow, even as her protective instincts flared. Ethan, unaware of the storm gathering in the distance, continued his careful journey. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. He could not yet imagine the confrontation that awaited him, the test of courage and humanity that would define not only his life, but the future relationship between his people and hers. For now, the world was chaos, but in the small moments, the warmth of the child pressed against him, the quiet determination in his own heart, there was hope. Hope that even in a universe filled with war and fear, One human could make a difference. One human could change the course of events simply by choosing to protect life, no matter how alien or distant. And as the stars shone faintly above, Ethan whispered to the sleeping child, "We'll make it through this together." The first part of the journey had begun, and though danger surrounded them, the bond between human and alien child had been forged in fire, and nothing could easily break it. The morning sun filtered through the broken canopy, casting long shadows across the scorched landscape. Ethan moved carefully, each step deliberate, scanning the area for signs of danger. Lyra walked close beside him, her small hand tightly holding his. Her silver eyes darted at every movement, every flicker of light, showing awareness and alertness beyond her age. She had changed since the ambush. No longer was she a trembling child. She was cautious, almost calculating, as if she understood the gravity of their situation. They had been on the run for 2 days now, traversing rugged terrain, dodging enemy patrols, and scavenging what little supplies they could find. Ethan's shoulder had healed slightly, but the wound still throbbed. He had fashioned a makeshift bandage, but the pain reminded him with every movement of how close he had come to losing everything in that first ambush. Despite this, he refused to slow down. Every step was vital. Every decision could mean life or death for both of them. They came to a clearing where the remains of an old alien settlement lay. Crumbling walls and rusted machinery told the story of a civilization long past its prime. Ethan lowered himself to examine the area, noting signs of recent activity. Someone had been here recently. Not human. Alien footprints, larger than his own, marked the ground, and fragments of what looked like advanced weaponry littered the field. Lyra crouched beside him, pointing at a set of prints that Ethan had initially missed. She whispered something in her language, a soft string of words he could not understand, but her tone was urgent. Ethan nodded, understanding the warning. They moved carefully, weaving through the ruins, avoiding obvious paths, and using the collapsed buildings for cover. By midday, they had reached the edge of a dense forest. Ethan paused, trying to decide the best route forward. He could hear distant humming, the signature sound of hovering patrol drones. The technology was alien, unlike anything he had seen before, and the precision with which they scanned the terrain indicated intelligence. His mind raced. Every route had its risks. If they took the open path, they could be spotted easily. If they moved through the thick forest, the terrain could slow them down, and predators might lurk in the shadows. "I'll go through the forest," he finally decided, signaling Lyra to follow. She hesitated for a moment but then obeyed, trusting his judgment completely. As they moved, the forest grew denser, the light fading beneath the thick canopy. Ethan could hear every snap of twig underfoot, every rustle of leaves, every distant screech of alien creatures. He had learned to rely on all his senses, predicting danger before it became immediate. Lyra mimicked him, moving quietly, almost like a shadow. Hours passed and the forest grew darker. Ethan spotted movement ahead, a patrol of small drones scanning the ground with glowing beams of light. He froze, pressing Lyra against a fallen log. The drones moved systematically, their sensors sweeping the area. Ethan considered attacking, but one wrong move could expose them both. He whispered, "Wait, let them pass." Lyra's hand tightened on his arm, her tiny fingers trembling, but she did not speak. She had learned to trust his instincts. Ethan counted the seconds as the drones passed, holding his breath with every movement. When the last one had disappeared into the shadows, he exhaled slowly. "Okay, move," he said, and they slipped silently into the undergrowth, leaving the patrol behind. As night fell, they set up a temporary shelter beneath the roots of a massive tree. Ethan fashioned a small fire, careful to keep it hidden from the sky above. Lyra huddled close, her eyes reflecting the faint glow. She was quiet, almost meditative, as if she were replaying the events of the day in her mind. Ethan watched her, sensing her growing understanding of danger, survival, and trust. He thought about her mother, Commander Saria, and the reports Ethan's actions had triggered. The woman was not only powerful but intelligent and relentless. Ethan knew that her army would begin a systematic search for him. They would not act immediately, but once they mobilized, escape would be nearly impossible. The thought made him uneasy, but he refused to show fear. Lyra needed him strong. She needed hope. The next day they continued their journey, moving along the river that cut through the forest. The water provided both direction and resources, though it also brought risk. Ethan knew that patrols would often scan waterways, assuming that refugees might use them to travel. As they walked, Lyra suddenly froze, her body rigid. She pointed to a figure in the distance, partially obscured by the trees. Ethan squinted. It was humanoid but moving differently, fluid, controlled, almost deliberate. He crouched, signaling Lyra to stay low. The figure stopped, scanning the area. Ethan recognized it immediately from intelligence reports, a scout from Saria's army. The scout's armor glinted in the dim light, alien glyphs etched into the plating. Its sensors swept methodically. Ethan knew that one mistake now would mean capture, or worse. He whispered to Lyra, "Stay behind me. Follow my lead." Moving slowly, Ethan positioned himself behind a fallen tree. He waited for the scout to turn, then made a calculated dash to the next cover point. Lyra followed without hesitation. Every step required patience, timing, and precise calculation. When the scout finally passed, they slipped further into the forest, hearts pounding. By mid-afternoon, the forest opened into a wide plain. Ethan took a moment to rest, his back against a rock, while Lyra played near the tall grass. He scanned the horizon, noticing faint dust trails. Saria's army was moving, slowly but purposefully. He knew it was only a matter of time before they encountered her forces. Ethan also realized that the child's survival had already become legendary in the reports reaching her. His actions had made him a target. Despite the looming danger, Ethan felt a growing connection with Lyra. Her intelligence, courage, and trust reminded him of the best qualities of humanity. He had saved her life, yes, but in return, she gave him purpose beyond the battlefield. Protecting her was no longer just about duty. It was about hope, morality, and a bond that transcended species. That evening, as they rested near the edge of a ravine, strange sounds echoed from the distance. Ethan immediately recognized them as alien patrols, larger this time, more organized. He realized Saria's army was closing in faster than he had anticipated. He whispered to Lyra, "We need to move. Now." They navigated the ravine carefully, the terrain steep and unstable. Rocks shifted under their weight, and the echoes of distant pursuit made every step tense. Lyra stayed close, her small hand gripping his. Ethan marveled at her bravery. She did not cry, she did not panic. She simply followed, learning from him, trusting him completely. After hours of careful movement, they found a small alcove in the ravine, hidden from aerial scans. Ethan allowed them a brief respite. He checked his makeshift bandage again, noting that it had frayed and blood had seeped through. Lyra noticed immediately and tried to help, mimicking his careful hands. He smiled faintly, appreciating her intent. "Good job," he said. "You're learning fast." Suddenly, the air shifted. Ethan sensed movement beyond the alcove. Shadows flickered along the walls, and the soft crunch of boots reached his ears. He tensed, signaling Lyra to stay hidden. Through the dim light, he saw figures approaching, Saria's elite guards, sent ahead to locate the human who had protected her child. Ethan evaluated his options. A fight was possible, but the odds were against him. Escape seemed improbable, yet staying hidden might only delay the inevitable. He whispered to Lyra, "We have to keep moving. Can you trust me?" She nodded, eyes wide but determined. He lifted her, cradling her against his chest, and prepared to descend the ravine under cover of darkness. The descent was treacherous. Loose rocks shifted, and Ethan's hands were scraped and bloodied, but he moved steadily, calculating each step. Lyra remained calm, her faith in him unwavering. They reached the bottom just as the first patrols caught sight of their previous hiding spot. Ethan allowed himself a small surge of relief, for now they were safe. Hours later, they emerged into a narrow canyon. Ethan stopped, scanning the walls. He realized that their path would force them through a choke point, a natural bottleneck perfect for ambush. He considered alternatives but found none. The patrols would expect them to take this route. They had no choice. He whispered to Lyra, "Stay close. Follow my lead." The child did as instructed, her small hands gripping his. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that every decision he made could mean life or death for both of them. He led them forward, careful to move silently, using every shadow, every rock, every crevice for cover. As they moved through the canyon, distant voices reached them, distorted and alien. Saria's army was close, organized, and relentless. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. His mind raced through every tactic he knew, every maneuver he had trained for, every instinct honed over years of combat. He would not fail, not now, not ever. The sun set, leaving the canyon bathed in deep shadows. Ethan and Lyra pressed forward, knowing that tomorrow would bring confrontation, that their journey of survival was far from over. The bond between human and alien child had grown, forged in fire, trust, and courage. And though danger loomed on the horizon, Ethan felt a quiet certainty. They would face it together, and no army, no matter how powerful, could easily break the will of a human determined to protect life. Ethan and Lyra moved cautiously through the canyon, the shadows stretching, long and dark under the fading light. Every sound seemed amplified in the narrow walls, the distant hum of alien engines, the rustle of stones beneath their feet, even Lyra's quiet breaths. Ethan's mind raced with strategies, but no plan could ignore one hard truth. Commander Saria herself was leading the pursuit. Her forces were vast, precise, and relentless. He paused behind a large boulder, pressing Lyra close. "We're almost at the end of the canyon," he whispered. "After this, we can find higher ground. It will be safer for a while." Lyra's hand found his, gripping tightly. She didn't speak, but her eyes conveyed understanding, trust, and courage. Ethan scanned the narrow path ahead. It was perfect for an ambush. He knew they had little time before Saria's elite guards would set traps, use drones, or even employ advanced scanning to locate them. He whispered to Lyra again, "Stay right behind me. Follow my lead and don't let go." She nodded, her small face pale but resolute. As they moved forward, the first wave of guards appeared. Clad in sleek armor that reflected the fading light, they were fast, silent, and deadly. Ethan ducked behind a fallen pillar, pulling Lyra down with him. The patrol scanned the canyon, their sensors glowing softly, calculating, intelligent. Ethan's mind worked frantically, considering tactics. Fighting was possible, but it would be risky. They were outnumbered and outgunned. He decided on distraction. Ethan picked up loose stones, throwing them to the far side of the canyon. One after another, small rocks clattered against the walls. The guards turned, and Ethan seized the moment. He grabbed Lyra's hand and darted forward, slipping past the confused patrol. Lyra kept pace, moving silently, her small body pressed close to his. The canyon opened into a wide plateau, dotted with alien ruins and jagged rocks. Ethan stopped for a moment, scanning the horizon. Smoke from distant fires painted the sky orange and red, reflecting the chaos of the larger battlefield. Somewhere beyond the plateau, Commander Saria's army was moving, precise, controlled, and inexorably closing in. Ethan realized they needed higher ground, a vantage point to see incoming threats and plan their next move. He spotted a series of tall rocks forming a natural ridge. He and Lyra climbed carefully, using footholds and ledges, every movement deliberate and quiet. Lyra's small hands gripped his jacket for balance, her trust unwavering. At the top, Ethan finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. From this height, he could see the movements below, small patrols, drones scanning systematically, and signs of a larger force moving in formation. It was a calculation, not brute force, and Ethan realized he was facing one of the smartest alien armies he had ever encountered. But he also knew something they didn't. Humans thrived on adaptability, unpredictability, and courage in the face of impossible odds. Lyra pointed at a group of approaching vehicles, a mixture of alien technology and mechanical beasts. Ethan understood immediately. They were closing in but not yet aware of their exact position. He needed a plan and fast. Using rocks, debris, and makeshift tools, Ethan set small traps along the ridge. He fashioned distractions, noisemakers, and improvised barriers. Each action delayed the enemy, buying them precious time. Lyra watched, learning quickly, moving with him, mimicking his movements, and even helping where she could. Ethan marveled at her intelligence. She was not just a child. She was a prodigy in survival, a being who understood instinctively how to navigate danger. As the first patrols reached the base of the ridge, Ethan took a deep breath and whispered to Lyra, "Stay behind me. This is going to get loud." He activated one of his makeshift devices, sending a burst of sound and light across the plateau. The patrols turned, confused and disoriented. Ethan used the chaos to slip down the other side, carrying Lyra with him. Hours passed and night fell. Ethan found a narrow cave beneath the ridge, hidden from aerial scans. They entered and Ethan set a small fire, careful to keep it low. Lyra curled against him, exhausted but alert. He examined his makeshift bandages and injuries. Every muscle ached, every step leaving pain in its wake. Yet he refused to show weakness. The child needed him strong, calm, and focused. Outside, the night was alive with distant patrols and the hum of drones. Seria's army was relentless, but Ethan had learned the value of patience and observation. He whispered to Lyra, "Tomorrow we face them. But remember, we do this together. No matter what, we survive." Lyra nodded, eyes wide but determined. The next morning, the confrontation began. Commander Seria herself appeared with a small elite force. She was taller than most humans, her presence commanding, her armor elegant yet deadly. Her eyes scanned the terrain, landing on Ethan and Lyra. She did not attack immediately. Instead, she observed, calculating. Every movement, every breath, every decision Ethan made would be noted. She wanted to see whether humans were merely reckless or capable of genuine courage and strategy. Ethan saw her approaching and adjusted his position, hiding Lyra behind him. He knew that fighting her army outright would be suicide, yet surrender was unthinkable. He needed a way to prove his intent, to show that his actions were not mere luck, but deliberate courage. Seria's voice echoed across the plateau, calm but commanding. "Human," she said, her tone sharp. "You endangered my child, yet she lives. Why?" Ethan stepped forward, raising his hand slightly, careful not to seem aggressive. "Because saving a child is the right thing," he replied, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "No matter who they are, no matter where they're from, life matters." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Seria studied him, her eyes searching for weakness, deception, or fear. She saw none. She saw only courage, intelligence, and sincerity. Slowly she nodded, though it was not a gesture of acceptance, it was acknowledgement. She wanted to test him further. A trial was set. Seria's elite forces created a controlled obstacle course across the plateau, simulating combat scenarios, traps, and ambushes. Ethan would have to protect Lyra while navigating every danger. Success meant freedom. Failure meant capture, or worse. The trial began. Ethan moved quickly, using every skill at his disposal. He ducked behind barriers, rolled across open terrain, and guided Lyra through narrow passages. Drones swooped, traps triggered, and enemy soldiers attempted to block their path. Yet Ethan anticipated each move, adapting faster than anyone could predict. Lyra followed his lead, helping where she could, her quick mind proving invaluable. At one point, a large energy barrier blocked their path. Ethan quickly scavenged nearby debris, fashioning a temporary shield to protect Lyra as they moved. Sparks flew, the ground trembled, but they pushed through. The elite guards watched in silence, noting every act, every decision. Saria herself observed, her expression unreadable. Hours passed in relentless action. Ethan's body burned with exhaustion, yet he refused to slow down. Every step, every decision, every breath was calculated to protect Lyra. The child's safety was his priority above all else. Finally, they reached the end of the trial. Saria stepped forward, her army forming ranks behind her. Ethan, panting, battered but unbroken, held Lyra close. The child looked up at him, eyes wide with trust and admiration. Saria studied them both, then spoke. "You have proven yourself human," she said, "not just in bravery but in honor. My daughter is safe because of you. That is a rare quality even among my people." Ethan lowered himself slightly, catching his breath. "She's brave," he said, nodding toward Lyra. "I just followed her trust." Saria's lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. She extended a hand, not in combat but as acknowledgement. "You have earned more than freedom. You have earned respect." Her army stepped back, allowing Ethan and Lyra safe passage. He could not believe the relief flooding through him. Months of running, hiding, fighting, and surviving had led to this moment. He had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, not through power, but through courage, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to protect life. Lyra ran to her mother, embracing her tightly. Saria knelt beside her, whispering words Ethan could not understand. Yet he could see the gratitude in her eyes, the relief, the pride. She looked at Ethan, her gaze softening. For the first time, he saw respect, admiration, and acknowledgement of the human spirit that had saved her child. Ethan stepped back, feeling the weight of the journey settle in his chest. He had survived, yes, but more importantly, he had proven that humans could inspire trust, forge bonds, and face impossible odds with courage and ingenuity. Saria's army, once an overwhelming threat, now acknowledged him not as an enemy but as a worthy individual. As dawn broke over the plateau, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ethan watched the alien forces prepare to depart. Lyra waved at him, her small hand lifted in farewell, and he smiled faintly, knowing that their bond would never be broken, even across species and worlds. For Ethan, the battle had ended, but the memory of bravery, trust, and courage would remain forever. One human had stood against the odds, protected life when no one else could, and earned the respect of an entire alien army. And in that moment, he understood something profound. Courage and humanity were forces far greater than any weapon, any army, or any fear. The plateau fell silent, save for the whisper of wind through the rocks. Ethan turned, walking toward the horizon, knowing that the universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. Yet he also knew that even in the darkest moments, one human could make a difference. One human could change the course of lives, forge bonds across worlds, and remind the universe of the power of compassion, courage, and honor. And as the first light of a new day touched the battlefield, Ethan and Lyra's story became a legend, not of conquest, but of the quiet, enduring heroism of a human who had shielded life against all odds.